My boyfriend's smartwatch wouldn't stop buzzing during our Sunday brunch. The messages kept appearing. Last night was incredible and can't wait to see you again tomorrow. We'd been together for 3 years and just put a deposit down on our dream townhouse, my heart racing. I casually topped off his mimosa and pretended I hadn't seen a thing. I never thought I'd be the type of person to set up surveillance cameras in my own home. I always believed relationships were built on trust, communication, and mutual respect. But that was before I discovered that the man I'd planned to spend my life with had been living a double life right under my nose. My name is Mia, and until 3 weeks ago, I thought I had everything figured out. Ethan and I had been together for 3 years of building a life together, making plans for the future, and believing we were each other's forever person. We had just put a deposit down on a beautiful Victorian townhouse in the historic district. The kind with those gorgeous bay windows and intricate moldings that I'd always dreamed about. We even had names picked out for our future children and a joint investment account that we jokingly called our grown-up achievement. In millennial terms, we were practically married. Sunday brunches had been our tradition since the early days of our relationship. While other couples in our social circle were sleeping in or nursing hangovers, Ethan and I would be at our favorite local cafe, Maple, Rye, sharing avocado toast and planning our week ahead. It was during one of these brunches exactly 3 weeks ago that my perfect life began to unravel. That particular Sunday seemed like any other. The cafe was bustling with its usual weekend crowd. The spring sunshine was streaming through the windows, and Ethan was telling me about a new project his architecture firm had just landed. He was animated, excited about the challenge, and I was genuinely happy for him. His career had been taking off lately. With a recent promotion that had come with a significant pay raise money we were putting toward furnishing our soon-to-be new home, this client wants something really innovative for their headquarters, Ethan was saying, cutting into his Eggs Benedict. Olivia thinks we should propose a living wall concept for the main lobby. It's sustainable and makes a statement, Olivia? I asked, taking a sip of my mimosa. Is she new? Oh, the design consultant I mentioned last month, Ethan replied, a bit too quickly. She joined the firm from Boston. She's brilliant with sustainable design elements. I nodded, vaguely remembering him mentioning a new consultant, though I couldn't recall any specific details about her. Before I could ask anything else, Ethan's smartwatch began to buzz repeatedly on his wrist. He glanced down, then quickly covered it with his napkin. Work never stops, huh? I said lightly, yeah, just some notifications about tomorrow's meeting, he replied, taking a large gulp of his mimosa. But as he reached for the maple syrup, his watch buzzed again. And this time I caught a glimpse of the message preview. Last night was incredible. My heart stuttered in my chest, but I kept my expression neutral. Maybe it was a colleague talking about a work event, a client praising a presentation. I tried to rationalize it, even as a cold feeling began to spread through my body. When Ethan excused himself to use the restroom a few minutes later, he left his watch on the table. Another message came through. Can't wait to see you again tomorrow. Still thinking about how you felt against me. The world around me seemed to freeze. The cafe noise faded to a distant hum as I stared at those words, trying to make them mean something, anything other than what they clearly meant. My fingers trembled as I reached for my water glass, nearly knocking it over. When Ethan returned, I somehow managed to smile, to continue our conversation as if nothing had happened. I even suggested we stop by the home decor store after brunch to look at paint samples for the townhouse, all while my mind was racing, trying to process what I'd just seen. You okay? Ethan asked as we walked to the car. You seem distracted, just thinking about all the work I have to do this week. I lied, hating how easily the deception came to my lips. Was this how he felt when he lied to me? This strange mixture of guilt and self-preservation. That night, after Ethan had fallen asleep, I did something I never thought I would do. I checked his phone. The rational part of me argued that this was an invasion of privacy, that relationships needed trust to survive. But another part I barely recognized whispered that trust had already been broken, and I deserved to know the truth. His phone was locked, but I knew his password, his mother's birthday. We'd always had an open phone policy, not because we snooped on each other, but because we had nothing to hide, or so I thought. What I found confirmed my worst fears. The messages from Olivia Design were extensive, going back nearly 2 months. They weren't just about work. There were intimate photos, plans for hotel meetups, inside jokes about their colleagues, and about me. Does Mia suspect anything? Olivia had asked in one message. No, Ethan had replied. She's too busy planning our future house to notice I'm not as invested anymore. I'm trying to figure out how to end things without hurting her too much." The audacity of that message made my blood boil. He was trying not to hurt me while sleeping with another woman and planning a future home with me. The timestamp showed H sent that message right after Wed finalized our townhouse deposit, a deposit that had included my entire vintage watch collection, which had sold to contribute my share. I scrolled further, my hands shaking with rage and heartbreak. There were messages about their connection, how they'd never felt this way before, how they were trying to be responsible about the situation, as if there was anything responsible about betraying someone who loved and trusted you completely. I wanted to wake him up right then, to confront him with the evidence and demand answers, but something stopped me. A cold, calculating voice I'd never heard before in my mind. If I confronted him now, he would have time to prepare, to craft explanations and excuses. He might delete evidence, talk to Olivia to align their stories, or worse, make me feel like I was overreacting. No, I needed time to process this, to plan my next steps carefully. So I gently placed his phone back exactly where it had been, wiped away my tears, and lay beside him, staring at the ceiling until morning came. The next day, I called in sick to work, something I rarely did, and contacted my best friend Zoe. Within an hour, she was at my apartment, armed with coffee and a determination to help me through this. That absolute piece of garbage. Zoe fumed after I showed her the screenshots I'd taken. 3 years? Mia, 3 years, and he's been cheating with this Boston design witch. For 2 months at least, I said, my voice hollow, and planning our future home the entire time. What are you going to do? Zoe asked, squeezing my hand. That was the question, wasn't it? What was I going to do with this heartbreaking information? I need to know more, I decided. I need to understand the full extent of this before I confront him. Zoe nodded. Detective mode activated. Where do we start? We began with the obvious, our shared accounts. Ethan and I had maintained separate personal accounts but had opened a joint investment account for house-related expenses about a year ago. When we logged in, the evidence was damning. There were charges for restaurants I'd never been to, boutique hotels on weekends when Ethan claimed to be at architecture conferences, and even a charge from an upscale jewelry store from last month, a purchase I'd never seen. The date coincided with Olivia's birthday. According to a message I'd seen congratulating her, he bought her jewelry, I said, my voice breaking, with money from our joint account. Money that was supposed to be for our home. The more we looked, the more we found. Ethan's work calendar, which was synced to our shared cloud account, showed numerous private meetings that aligned perfectly with the hotel charges. There were Uber receipts to an address in the Arts District, presumably Olivia's apartment, on evenings when H told me he was working late. The new cologne, I suddenly remembered. The password changes on his laptop, the sudden interest in sustainable architecture. It was all because of her. Zoe pulled up Olivia's social media profiles. She was stunning, tall, elegant, with the kind of effortless style that belonged in design magazines. Her profile was filled with sophisticated architectural photos, sustainability conferences, and artistic shots of cities around the world. She was exactly the type of woman I'd always secretly feared I couldn't compete with. Accomplished, worldly, and undeniably beautiful. Don't do that, Zoe said sharply, noticing my expression. Don't compare yourself to her. This isn't about you not being enough. This is about Ethan being a cheating liar who doesn't deserve you. She was right, but it didn't ease the pain. 3 years of memories were now tainted with doubt. Had there been others before Olivia? Had any of it been real? So what's the plan? Zoe asked after Wed spent hours gathering evidence. Dramatic confrontation? Quiet exit? Public humiliation? I considered my options carefully. I didn't want to just confront Ethan and have him gaslight me or minimize what H done. I didn't want to just walk away either, allowing him to spin whatever narrative he wanted about our breakup. And while public humiliation might feel satisfying in the moment, it wasn't really my style. No, I wanted something more impactful. I wanted Ethan to truly understand what H thrown away. I wanted him to feel the same earth-shattering pain that I was feeling. I need to catch them together. I finally said, irrefutable evidence. And then I need to make sure everyone knows exactly who Ethan really is. Over the next week, I became someone I barely recognized, the perfect, unsuspecting girlfriend. I made Ethan's favorite meals. Didn't question when he was texting and smiling at his phone, though now I knew exactly who was on the other end, and even initiated intimacy, which made me feel physically ill afterward. But I had to keep up appearances while I finalized my plan. I casually mentioned that I might be attending a photography workshop in Portland the following weekend, photography being a hobby I'd recently taken up. Ethan immediately perked up at this news, trying to hide his excitement but failing miserably. I could practically see the wheels turning in his head about having the apartment to himself. "That sounds great, babe," he said, kissing my forehead. "You've been wanting to improve your photography skills? It'll be good for you to focus on something you enjoy." The irony of his supportive boyfriend act wasn't lost on me. The next day, while Ethan was at work, Zoe helped me install a smart security system in our apartment. The small, discreet cameras were positioned strategically, one in the living room, one covering the kitchen and dining area, and one in the hallway leading to our bedroom. I drew the line at putting one in the bedroom itself. I needed evidence, not trauma. I also consulted with a financial advisor, who helped me understand my options regarding the townhouse deposit. Since we weren't married and the property wasn't in our names yet, I had some legal recourse to reclaim my investment, specifically the value of my vintage watch collection that had sold to contribute to our future. By Friday, everything was in place. I packed a weekend bag for my photography workshop and kissed Ethan goodbye, promising to call him when I arrived in Portland. "Have fun," he said, hugging me tightly. "I'll just be catching up on work and probably watching that ultra-marathon documentary I've been wanting to see." The lie came so easily to him. According to the messages I'd seen, he and Olivia had already planned an entire weekend together in our apartment, cooking dinner, drinking the expensive wine I'd been saving for a special occasion, and sleeping in our bed. Instead of heading to the airport, I went straight to Zoe's apartment across town. We'd set up what she jokingly called Command Central, my laptop connected to the security system, snacks for stress eating, and enough wine to get through what we knew would be a difficult night. "Are you sure you want to watch this?" Zoe asked gently. "We can just record it for evidence and you can look away." I shook my head. "I need to see it, all of it. I need to know exactly what I'm dealing with." Around 7:30 that evening, the security system alerted us to movement at the front door. My heart pounded as I watched Ethan welcome Olivia into our home with a passionate kiss that made my stomach turn. She was even more beautiful in motion than in photos, carrying an overnight bag and a bottle of what looked like expensive champagne. They didn't even wait until they were fully inside before they started pawing at each other. I heard Ethan say, "Finally, an entire Ethan and Olivia weekend without having to worry about Mia." Olivia laughed, a musical sound that grated on my nerves. "Your place is cute," she said, looking around our apartment, the apartment I had lovingly decorated, where I had built memories with the man who was now betraying me in the most intimate way possible. "It's just temporary," Ethan replied dismissively. "Once I figure out how to handle the townhouse situation with Mia, we can look for something that's more us." More us? They were already planning a future together in a home that I had helped finance. The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. I watched, numb with shock, as they made themselves comfortable in my space. Ethan opened the bottle of champagne I'd been saving for our anniversary. They cooked together in my kitchen, using the expensive copper pans my parents had given us last Christmas. They cuddled on my couch, watching a movie on the TV Ethan and I had picked out together. "I can't watch anymore," I finally said around midnight as they headed toward the bedroom. "I've seen enough," Zoe nodded, closing the laptop. "What's next?" "Tomorrow," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "We end this." I barely slept that night, my mind racing with plans and backup plans. By morning, I had made my decision. This wouldn't be a quiet exit or private confrontation. This would be a reckoning. You see, what Ethan didn't know was that his parents were coming to town that weekend. They'd been planning to surprise us with a visit to celebrate our townhouse purchase and had asked me to keep it secret. I had completely forgotten about it in the chaos of discovering his betrayal, but now it seemed like perfect timing. His parents had always loved me, treating me like the daughter they never had. They had even contributed to our townhouse deposit as an early wedding gift, convinced that Ethan and I were headed for marriage. They were supposed to arrive around noon and had a key to our apartment, a key I had given them for emergencies. I texted his mother, Barbara, that morning. "Can't wait to see you today. Ethan has no idea you're coming. He'll be so surprised. Let yourselves in around noon if we're not back yet. We might be out getting brunch." Then I sent messages to a few of Ethan's colleagues, including his boss, inviting them to an impromptu engagement party at our apartment at 12:30. "Ethan finally proposed last night," I wrote. "We're having a small celebration. He wants to keep it intimate, so he's asked me to invite you." Please don't tell him you know he wants to announce it himself. By 11:30, Zoe and I were parked outside my apartment building, waiting. I had dressed carefully, a simple blue dress that Ethan had always said brought out my eyes, minimal makeup, hair loose the way he liked it. I wanted to look exactly like the woman he had claimed to love, the woman he had betrayed so thoroughly. At precisely noon, I watched Ethan's parents enter the building, excited smiles on their faces. 15 minutes later, the first of his colleagues arrived, followed by several more, including his boss, Richard, who was carrying a bottle of champagne. "It's time," Zoe said, squeezing my hand. I nodded, took a deep breath, and walked into the building. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat, but my resolve was firm. This was not just about revenge, it was about truth, about consequences, about reclaiming my power in a situation where I had been made to feel powerless. I used my key to open the apartment door quietly. The scene that greeted me was chaotic and perfect. Ethan's parents were standing in the living room, shock evident on their faces. Several of his colleagues were clustered awkwardly by the door, and in the center of it all stood Ethan and Olivia, clearly just emerged from the bedroom, both in various states of undress, Ethan in boxers and a t-shirt, Olivia in what I recognized as one of my silk robes. The silence was deafening as everyone registered what they were seeing. Ethan's face went from confusion to horror in the span of seconds as he saw me standing in the doorway. "Mia," he gasped. "I thought you were supposed to be in Portland." "Surprise," I said calmly. Stepping into the apartment, I decided my workshop could wait. "It seems I made the right decision." His mother found her voice first. "Ethan James Walker, what is going on here? Who is this woman?" Olivia looked around wildly, clutching my robe tighter around her body. "Ethan, you said she was away for the weekend. You said your parents were in Phoenix." "Oh, Ethan lies about a lot of things," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "He told me he was working late when he was with you. He told you I was in Portland when I wasn't. He told everyone he was committed to our relationship while he was planning a future with you." I turned to address the room. "For those of you who don't know, this is Olivia. She's the design consultant at Walker Architecture who's been sleeping with Ethan for the past 2 months while he and I were putting a deposit down on a townhouse, while his parents were giving us money as an early wedding present, and while his colleague Marcus was being passed over for promotion in favor of Ethan, partly because Olivia here advocated for him in meetings. Marcus, standing near the door with a confused expression, straightened up at this information. Richard, Ethan's boss, set down the champagne bottle with a heavy thud. "Mia, please," Ethan started, taking a step toward me. "This isn't what it looks like, really," I interrupted, pulling out my phone, "because I have hours of security footage that shows exactly what it is." I played a short clip of them entering the apartment the previous evening, kissing passionately in the doorway. I texted his mother, Barbara, that morning. "Can't wait to see you today. Ethan has no idea you're coming. He'll be so surprised. Let yourselves in around noon if we're not back yet. We might be out getting brunch." Then I sent messages to a few of Ethan's colleagues, including his boss, inviting them to an impromptu engagement party at our apartment at 12:30. "Ethan finally proposed last night," I wrote. "We're having a small celebration. He wants to keep it intimate, so he's asked me to invite you. Please don't tell him you know he wants to announce it himself." By 11:30, Zoe and I were parked outside my apartment building, waiting. I had dressed carefully, a simple blue dress that Ethan had always said brought out my eyes, minimal makeup, hair loose the way he liked it. I wanted to look exactly like the woman he had claimed to love, the woman he had betrayed so thoroughly. At precisely noon, I watched Ethan's parents enter the building, excited smiles on their faces. 15 minutes later, the first of his colleagues arrived, followed by several more, including his boss, Richard, who was carrying a bottle of champagne. "It's time," Zoe said, squeezing my hand. I nodded, took a deep breath, and walked into the building. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat, but my resolve was firm. This was not just about revenge, it was about truth, about consequences, about reclaiming my power in a situation where I had been made to feel powerless. I used my key to open the apartment door quietly. The scene that greeted me was chaotic and perfect. Ethan's parents were standing in the living room, shock evident on their faces. Several of his colleagues were clustered awkwardly by the door, and in the center of it all stood Ethan and Olivia, clearly just emerged from the bedroom, both in various states of undress. Ethan in boxers and a t-shirt, Olivia in what I recognized as one of my silk robes. The silence was deafening as everyone registered what they were seeing. Ethan's face went from confusion to horror in the span of seconds as he saw me standing in the doorway. "Mia," he gasped. "I thought you were supposed to be in Portland." "Surprise," I said calmly. Stepping into the apartment, I decided my workshop could wait. "It seems I made the right decision." His mother found her voice first. "Ethan James Walker, what is going on here? Who is this woman?" Olivia looked around wildly, clutching my robe tighter around her body. "Ethan, you said she was away for the weekend. You said your parents were in Phoenix." "Oh." "Ethan lies about a lot of things," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "He told me he was working late when he was with you. He told you I was in Portland when I wasn't. He told everyone he was committed to our relationship while he was planning a future with you." I turned to address the room. "For those of you who don't know, this is Olivia. She's the design consultant at Walker Architecture who's been sleeping with Ethan for the past 2 months while he and I were putting a deposit down on a townhouse, while his parents were giving us money as an early wedding present, and while his colleague Marcus was being passed over for promotion in favor of Ethan, partly because Olivia here advocated for him in meetings." Marcus, standing near the door with a confused expression, straightened up at this information. "Richard, Ethan's boss, set down the champagne bottle with a heavy thud." "Mia, please," Ethan started, taking a step toward me. "This isn't what it looks like, really," I interrupted, pulling out my phone, "because I have hours of security footage that shows exactly what it is." I played a short clip of them entering the apartment the previous evening, kissing passionately in the doorway. Ethan's father, James, a typically stoic man, looked like he might be ill. "Son, tell me this isn't true." But Ethan couldn't deny what was right in front of everyone. His betrayal was laid bare, exposed to the people whose opinions mattered most to him: his parents, his colleagues, his boss. "I think," I said, addressing his stunned parents, "you should ask Ethan about the real reason he's been pushing for that promotion. Ask him about the jewelry he bought with our joint savings. Ask him about the hotels he's been charging to the credit card you co-signed for him." I turned to Richard next. "And you might want to review your company's policy on inter-office relationships, especially between people at different levels. I believe Marcus's wife is still undergoing cancer treatment. The promotion Ethan received would have helped with those medical bills." I imagine. The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Olivia had backed against the wall, looking like she wanted to disappear. Ethan was ashen, frozen in place by the public exposure of his deceptions. I walked to our bedroom, our former bedroom, and retrieved the small bag I had packed earlier that week, containing the few irreplaceable items I couldn't bear to leave behind. "I've already contacted the escrow company about the townhouse," I said, addressing Ethan directly now. "I'm withdrawing from the purchase. You'll be receiving formal notice from my lawyer about reclaiming the value of my watch collection that I contributed to the deposit." I looked around the apartment one last time at the photos of us on the walls, the furniture we had chosen together, the life we had built that had turned out to be a lie. "I've also taken the liberty of forwarding all the evidence of your affair to your email," I continued, my voice finally beginning to shake, "including the conversations where you discuss using our joint savings to buy gifts for Olivia. I thought you might need it for your records." I turned to leave, then paused at the door for one final statement. "You know what the worst part is, then? It's not that you cheated. It's that you made me believe we had a future together while you were actively planning to leave me. It's that you let me sell my grandfather's watch collection, the only thing I had left of him, to put a deposit on a home you never intended to share with me. It's the lies, the manipulation, the complete disregard for 3 years of my life." With that, I walked out, head held high, leaving behind the wreckage of Ethan's carefully constructed deceptions. Zoe was waiting for me in the hallway. She wrapped an arm around my shoulders and led me toward the elevator as the doors closed behind us. I finally allowed myself to cry, not just for the relationship I had lost, but for the person I had been, the trusting woman who had believed in love and partnership and honesty. "You did it," Zoe whispered, holding me tight. "It's over now." But it wasn't over. Not really. The aftermath of that day rippled outward in ways I couldn't have anticipated. By that evening, my phone was flooded with messages from Ethan, from his parents, from mutual friends who had heard various versions of what had happened. I ignored them all, checking into a hotel for the night to give myself space to breathe, to begin processing the seismic shift in my life. The next morning, I woke to an email from Barbara, Ethan's mother. Unlike the angry message I had half expected, hers was full of sorrow and apology. "Mia," she wrote, "I cannot begin to express how devastated James and I are by Ethan's behavior. We raised him to be better than this. What he did to you is unforgivable, and please know that we have made our disappointment abundantly clear to him. We've also insisted that he return our portion of the house deposit, which we intend to give directly to you. It won't undo the hurt he's caused, but it might help you start fresh. You will always be family to us, regardless of Ethan's terrible choices. I read the email 3 times, tears streaming down my face, in the midst of losing the future I had planned. It was a small comfort to know that not everything had been a lie. Barbara and James's affection for me had been genuine. Over the next few days, more details emerged through mutual friends. Ethan had been placed on probation at work pending an investigation into the potential ethics violation of his relationship with Olivia. Marcus was being reconsidered for the promotion Ethan had received, and Olivia apparently had requested a transfer back to the Boston office, effective immediately. As for Ethan himself, his messages evolved from angry accusations about my public humiliation tactics to desperate pleas for a chance to explain, to increasingly pathetic apologies. I read them all but responded to none. What explanation could possibly justify 2 months of deception? What apology could erase the image of him and Olivia in our home, planning a future that didn't include me? A week after the confrontation, I found a new apartment, a small but sunny studio in an area of town I had always loved but Ethan had deemed too artsy. I furnished it exactly as I wanted, with colorful throws and eclectic artwork that Ethan would have vetoed as not cohesive enough. For the first time in years, every decision was mine alone, and there was a strange freedom in that realization. Zoe helped me move in, bringing a housewarming gift of a security camera for my new front door, her idea of humor in a dark time. "Just in case you need to catch any more cheating bastards," she joked. Making me laugh for what felt like the first time in ages, I threw myself into my work, into rebuilding my life piece by piece. I joined a photography class for real this time, not as a cover story, discovering a passion and talent I hadn't known I possessed. Through the lens of my camera, I began to see the world differently, to focus on beauty and detail and moment-to-moment truth rather than an uncertain future. It was at one of my photography exhibitions, nearly 6 months later, that I saw Ethan again. I had been featured in a local arts showcase, my series on urban solitude receiving unexpected attention from critics and buyers alike. The gallery was crowded with art enthusiasts, friends, and colleagues from my work. I was explaining the concept behind one of my photographs when I felt a presence beside me. I turned to find Ethan, looking thinner than I remembered, his usually impeccable appearance slightly disheveled. "Your work is amazing," he said quietly. "I always knew you had an eye for beauty." I regarded him calmly, surprised by my own lack of emotional response. The sight of him no longer sent my heart racing or my stomach churning. He was just a person now, a person who had once been important to me but who now existed on the periphery of my life. "Thank you," I replied simply. "What are you doing here, Ethan?" He shifted uncomfortably. "I saw the exhibition announcement online. I wanted to see how you were doing, and to apologize again, in person this time." I glanced around the gallery, at the people admiring my work, at the life I had built from the ashes of his betrayal. "I'm doing well," I said, "better than I expected. Actually, I'm glad," he said, and he seemed sincere. "I'm moving to San Francisco next month. The firm's opening a new office there, and after everything, it seemed like a good time for a fresh start." I nodded, unsurprised. Of course he would frame his effective exile as a positive career move. That was Ethan, always spinning the narrative to cast himself in the best possible light. "I heard about your parents," I said. Barbara and James still called occasionally, keeping me updated on their lives. They had recently celebrated their 35th wedding anniversary with a trip to Italy. The anniversary trip looked beautiful in the photos. Ethan looked surprised, then sad. "They still talk to you?" It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "They do. They're good people, Ethan. Better than you deserved." He flinched at that but didn't argue. "Mia, I know it doesn't change anything, but I am truly sorry, not just for getting caught, but for what I did, for who I was, for the pain I caused you." I studied his face, searching for the man I had once loved so completely. He was still there, somewhere beneath the regret and consequences, but he was a stranger to me now. "I forgive you," I said finally, the words surprising me as much as they seemed to surprise him. "Not for your sake, but for mine. Carrying anger around is exhausting, and I have better things to do with my energy now." His eyes widened, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of hope there. I extinguished it quickly. "That doesn't mean I want you back in my life," I clarified. "It just means I'm not letting what you did define me anymore." He nodded slowly, accepting this. "You look happy," he said. "You deserve to be." "I am," I replied, and realized with some surprise that it was true. The happiness wasn't complete yet. There were still moments of sadness, of anger, of questioning, but it was growing, day by day, choice by choice. A gallery assistant approached. informing me that a potential buyer wanted to discuss one of my pieces. I excused myself from Ethan with a polite nod, walking away from him for the second and final time. That night, as I returned to my apartment, my space, filled with my choices and my life, I felt a sense of closure that had eluded me for months. Seeing Ethan had confirmed what I had begun to suspect, that the end of our relationship, painful as it had been, had also been a beginning of self-discovery, of strength I hadn't known I possessed, of a life built on my terms. I opened my laptop and found an email from a photography magazine, expressing interest in featuring my work in their upcoming issue. Next to my computer sat a brochure for a photography retreat in Tuscany that I was considering for the fall. On my wall hung a framed print of the first photograph it ever sold, a black and white image of an elderly couple on a park bench, their hands intertwined, their faces etched with the story of a lifetime spent together. That was the kind of love I still believed in, still hoped for someday. Honest, enduring, real. Ethan had not been capable of giving me that love, but his betrayal had set me on a path to finding something perhaps more important: the strength to love myself enough to demand better, to walk away from lies, to build a life that was authentically mine. As I prepared for bed, I caught sight of my reflection in the mirror, a woman I was still getting to know, still learning to trust again. She looked back at me with clear eyes and a slight smile, no longer defined by someone else's betrayal but by her own resilience. "We're going to be okay," I told her softly, and for the first time in a long time, I completely believed it. The townhouse Ethan and I had put a deposit on sold to another couple last month. I drove by it recently, saw their moving truck in the driveway, their excited faces as they carried boxes into what would have been my future home. I felt nothing but relief that it wasn't me tied to that mortgage, tied to Ethan and his lies. Sometimes I wonder where Olivia is now, if she and Ethan still talk, if she found what she was looking for in Boston, or if she's moved on to another city, another job, another relationship. I don't wish her ill. She was not the one who made promises to me, after all, but I hope she learned something from the experience. I hope we all did. Last week, I was unpacking the last box in my apartment. Yes, it took me 6 months to fully unpack, but I've been busy building a new life and found an old birthday card from Ethan. "To many more years of adventure together," it read, a few months ago. Finding this would have sent me into a spiral of grief and anger. This time, I just smiled sadly and threw it away. The past is the past. My future is unwritten, undefined by anyone's expectations but my own. And that, I've discovered, is the most beautiful kind of freedom. I still have the security footage from that weekend stored securely where no one else will ever see it. I don't watch it, don't need to revisit that pain. It served its purpose, forcing Ethan to face the consequences of his actions without the ability to deny or minimize what he'd done. Barbara called yesterday to tell me they're visiting the city next month and would love to see me for dinner. I said yes without hesitation. Family comes in many forms, I've learned, and sometimes the connections that remain after a relationship ends are unexpected blessings. As for me, I'm learning to trust again, slowly, cautiously, but with hope rather than fear. I'm building a photography business that brings me joy and fulfillment. I'm rediscovering parts of myself that got lost in the rhythm of coupled, my love of spontaneous road trips, my preference for spicy food that Ethan could never tolerate, my desire to perhaps someday live abroad. The betrayal behind the lens, both Ethan's betrayal and my subsequent journey through photography, changed me forever. But as any photographer knows, sometimes the most beautiful images emerge from the darkest exposures. You just need to know how to develop them properly, how to be patient with the process, how to recognize the art in what remains when everything else has been washed away. And that's exactly what I intend to do.